A special thank you to each of our subscribers who make this channel possible. Here's today's story. In a significant display of dissent, hundreds of protests erupted across the United States on Saturday, coinciding with President Donald Trump's military parade celebrating the Army's 250th anniversary, Flag Day, and the president's 79th birthday. Demonstrators gathered in cities from Augusta, Georgia to Los Angeles, California, voicing their opposition to the administration's policies, particularly concerning immigration and civil rights. Amanda Weimer, a protester in Augusta, expressed her desire for change, stating, "It's about the policies that have been enacted against immigrants and our own citizens. This is Augusta demanding rights for everyone." Weimer emphasized the empowerment felt by the large turnout, saying, "It's overwhelming to know what people want this. We want America for America." Parents also brought their children to the protests, hoping to instill the importance of speaking out. Toby White, one father at the Augusta demonstration, articulated his concerns over the erosion of due process, warning, "It's frightening because it's a slippery slope. It might begin with someone you don't agree with, and eventually, it could affect you. That's why we're here." His partner, Anae Armstrong, added, "We don't want her to grow up in a world where she doesn't feel like she can stand up for herself. We need to make sure that she uses her voice because that's how we got in this situation in the first place." Organizers of the protests emphasized a commitment to nonviolence, warning participants that those who did not adhere to the rules would be asked to leave. Fortunately, both the Augusta and Aiken protests proceeded without incident. However, tensions escalated in downtown Los Angeles as LAPD officers attempted to disperse crowds during the day's protests. A dispersal order was issued as demonstrators began throwing rocks and other objects. The police deployed less lethal measures, including flashbangs and tear gas, to manage the situation as they pushed crowds away from the federal building. The protests were part of a nationwide day of action against the Trump administration's policies, particularly its immigration enforcement strategies. Thousands gathered in Los Angeles, which has become a focal point for opposition to the administration, with demonstrators marching near City Hall and in Santa Monica, where signs expressed regret over the influence of Trump advisor Stephen Miller. In West Hollywood, screenwriter Dustin Lance Black highlighted the divisive tactics of the administration, stating, "They are trying to piss us off, one group after the other, so we become myopic. We become interested only in ourselves. And we become divided." Black referenced the legacy of Harvey Milk, asserting that coalitions must unite to fight for equality. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass urged protesters to remain peaceful, cautioning against giving the administration any excuse to intervene. In a controversial move, President Trump had federalized the National Guard, deploying 4,000 troops to Los Angeles and surrounding areas in response to demonstrations against ICE raids, a decision that Governor Gavin Newsom challenged in court, claiming it was an overreach of authority. The day of protest was overshadowed by tragic news from Minnesota, where Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband were shot in what authorities are investigating as a politically motivated attack. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz condemned the violence and urged the public to avoid attending demonstrations in the state out of caution. In Philadelphia, a flagship rally opened with a moment of meditation to honor the victims of the Minnesota shootings. Speakers included historian Tim Snyder and Martin Luther King III, who called for continued engagement in the fight for justice and equality. The protests, organized by a coalition of groups including Indivisible and the ACLU, aimed to reclaim patriotic symbols, with many waving American flags and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Ezra Levin, co-executive director of Indivisible, noted the historical significance of the U.S. flag as a symbol of resistance against tyranny. "Courage is contagious," he said, urging participants to remember the flag's original meaning as a defiance against oppression. While organizers deliberately avoided staging events in the heart of Washington, D.C., demonstrators still gathered near the White House, chanting slogans against the administration and displaying banners demanding Trump's resignation. However, much of the area remained sealed off by security fencing, limiting access for protesters. As the protests unfolded nationwide, they reflected a growing frustration with the current administration's policies and actions, uniting diverse groups under the banner of resistance. The No Kings demonstration served as a rallying cry for those advocating for democracy, equality, and immigrant rights, underscoring the deep divisions within the country and the urgent need for dialogue and action. That's all for this story. We upload videos every day covering many different subjects, so hit that subscribe button to stay informed. Thanks for watching.